Boyfriend's erotic roleplay on World of Warcraft feels like a virtual affair, undermining our relationship, and now I'm questioning what's real. I'm Kaylee, and my boyfriend is Sam. We met 5 years ago through a mutual friend during a wild night out, and I was instantly drawn to him. He felt the same way, and our connection grew into a relationship that seemed almost effortless. In less than a year, just 7 months in, we were already moving in together. That first year as a couple felt like something out of a romantic film. Honestly, we barely argued except for one major fight when I turned 23. We broke up for about a month after that, but neither of us even thought about seeing anyone else. Turns out, we were both just miserable apart and needed each other more than we realized. 2 years into our relationship, things started to get complicated. Sam bought World of Warcraft. I knew how addictive it could be. I have plenty of friends who play it, but I didn't think much of it at first. But then it took over his life. He started playing nonstop. He'd skip meals I made for him if he was busy raiding, would refuse to join me for our favorite shows, even preferred playing the game over having sex. He would stay up until dawn, sometimes skipping work just to keep playing. At first, I tried not to make a big deal of it, but eventually, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I told him how much it bothered me that he'd rather be in that virtual world than with me. His answer crushed me. He didn't really care and told me to butt out of his gaming life because he was having too much fun with his guild. I was beyond furious, but for reasons I can't even explain, I let it go. When 2 months had passed and things hadn't changed, I finally drew a line. I told him either the obsessive playing stopped, or I was leaving him. To my surprise, he listened. He canceled his account, all on his own. My relief was indescribable. Our lives improved almost instantly. He didn't touch the game again for a long time. In fact, he only reactivated his account at the beginning of this year after a friend bought him a game card. Clearly, he was excited to return, so I decided not to say anything since things had been pretty solid lately. Sure, he was back to playing regularly, but not anywhere near the insane levels before. Now, he actually prioritized me, his job, meals, and our couch potato TV time over the game. 3 hours a day max, that was manageable. I had my own stuff going on during those hours, so all in all, I was content. Until yesterday, when I discovered something that completely blindsided me. I sat next to Sam while he was on his computer, just doing my thing, and thought, why not watch him play? Might even help me understand why he's so into it. Classic case of be careful what you wish for. He was role-playing. Like, seriously role-playing. I'd heard rumors about RP and games, but never pegged Sam for the type. Still, I'm a big believer in to each their own, so I asked him what exactly he was doing. He said he was just in some city, Silver something, can't remember the name, pretending to buy apples because his character was hungry. He even explained all the different types of RP he does, which seemed way more detailed than I ever expected. Then he said something that made my jaw hit the floor. He's into ERP, which stands for Erotic Roleplay. Turns out, he's been role-playing sex, and his character has quite the reputation as a ladies' man. I just froze. I asked him for details, and he even showed me screenshots. I couldn't process how to feel. Was this cheating? Was I just being ridiculous? I have no idea. On the one hand, he's typing out explicit sexual stuff, detailed, graphic things like thrusting and more, with other people, who could be anyone behind the keyboard. On the other hand, they're just animated characters. The woman on the other side could just as easily be a man, or someone completely unlike the persona they create. Still, it definitely felt like something crossed a line. I tried to downplay it, but when he admitted he'd masturbated after these events and that some girls had even sent messages about pleasuring themselves to his keyboard skills, I couldn't shake the sense that something was very wrong. I told Sam straight up that I found it weird and considered it a form of cheating. He thought that was ridiculous and yelled after me as I walked away, telling me I was being silly and insisting that ERP wasn't remotely cheating, just weird, maybe. But I can't shake it. I'm caught between feeling like a complete fool and feeling completely betrayed. I don't even know what my own boundaries are anymore. Update 1. We spoke about the confrontation. He explained that he didn't think it was cheating because he wasn't feeling anything for the women he ERPs with in the game, only his character does. At this point, I was beyond fed up with all this role-playing nonsense. I told him point blank, his character isn't fucking real and he shouldn't be feeling anything for anyone because it's just a damn cartoon. I told him he was basically having sex chats with someone else, and that's absolutely infidelity in my book. Instead of being concerned about my accusation, he seemed more shocked that I'd insulted his roleplay. He kept stubbornly insisting it wasn't cheating at all, claiming it was only his character's sex life, not his. I tried to reason with him. If he was acting this way with someone over text, it would definitely be cheating, so why should it be any different just because it's happening in a game? That turned into him lecturing me for more than 2 hours about the entire concept of roleplay. Look, I respect anyone who enjoys roleplaying, it's your life, but let's be honest, he was just stacking up bullshit excuses at this point. He even went so far as to say that he only gets off because he thinks these blood elves or whatever in the game are better looking than anything he has in real life. Alright, I see where his head's at. How could I even compete with pixels? So, I made a decision. I was going undercover. I wanted to find out if he'd crossed the line if a girl started talking to him out of character, flirting with him as a person and not as his character. At that time, I was still desperately clinging to the hope that our relationship could be saved, but after everything that happened next, that hope didn't last. We ended up ERPing without him knowing it was me. I dashed over to my best friend's house, she already knew everything, and I borrowed her WoW account. To be honest, she was a bit baffled by the whole thing, but she understood why I couldn't just let him go without being sure. During the ERP, which left me feeling more foolish and humiliated than I've ever felt in my entire life, I tried steering things toward more personal, out-of-character conversation. That's when he told me he was single. He said we hadn't broken up. He told me he was fit, hit the gym regularly, a complete lie. He's actually a pretty big guy and genuinely never goes to the gym. Then he said he'd love to get my number, maybe we could meet up sometime. My jaw just about hit the floor. I have never felt so stupid, ever. I had thought this was just a weird phase, maybe he was just really into WoW. But this? This was real, concrete, out-of-character cheating. After grilling him with a few more questions, which I won't go into because, honestly, they still make me feel sick, I quickly logged off, thanked my friend, and updated her with everything I'd found out. When I got home, he was still glued to his PC. I was too upset to even speak. I really loved this guy, and it tore me apart to see how easily he was willing to throw everything away over a game. The whole month leading to this had been so horrible. I missed him terribly, but at the same time, there was a deep, burning hatred for what he'd become, and for WoW, even though it's not the game's fault. He changed so much over just a few months, and it makes me feel sick to think about it. The next morning, I ended it. I broke up with him, barely giving a reason, though I know he could sense something in me had shifted. I just told him I didn't want to be in the relationship anymore, and, with a resigned nod, he said he saw it coming. I packed my things and left as soon as I could. Now all my stuff is back at my parents' house, and I'm trying to pick up the pieces and move on. Update 2. I thought I was done. I was at my parents', trying to keep my brain off the whole mess by helping my mum alphabetize the spice rack, when my best friend's phone buzzed. It was her WoW account, the one I'd borrowed, getting pinged in some Discord I didn't recognize. The invite title said something like Bonding Ceremony in Silvermoon. I stared at it for a second, showed her, and we both had the same awful curiosity. I logged in. It was exactly what you think it was. Silver something city, red trees and floating lights, a crowd of elves lined up like a little fairy tale parade, and in the middle of it, Sam's character standing across from a girl with a floral headpiece glitching through her hair. Someone was officiating, typing long, syrupy lines about souls and moons and leaving the mortal tethers of former entanglements. He typed vows. Line by line. I watched my ex-boyfriend promise commitment and honesty as fireworks went off overhead. I didn't say a word. I didn't out him there. I just watched, fingers numb, swallowed this ridiculous, humiliating second-hand ceremony, and then I messaged the bride privately afterward and told her who I was. She replied in about a minute and asked if we could talk off the game. 10 minutes later, I was on the phone with a very real woman whose voice shook when she said his name. She told me she'd been speaking to him out of character for weeks. He told her he lived alone, was single, was working in fitness. He'd asked her to come up to Manchester next month, said he'd booked the train and just needed her to cover the hotel because his account was frozen. She sent me screenshots of him asking for money for a new graphics card because he said he wanted to stream their sessions in better quality. £400. He'd sent old photos, ones I recognized from years ago because of the beige curtains in our first flat. He kept dodging voice calls with excuses about roommates sleeping. She'd had a bad feeling and then saw my message and, in her words, felt her stomach drop through the floor. We traded proof like it was a crime scene. She sent me Discord audio of him laughing with his friends about finally being free of a normie girlfriend who didn't get it. I sent her the parts I had, his lies about being single to me, him asking for my number while thinking I was her. She said she was going to confront him. I told her I was done with him, but I wasn't going to tell her what to do beyond giving her what she needed to see clearly. An hour later, my phone lit up like a slot machine. Sam. At first it was paragraphs, I can explain. You've misunderstood. It's not what it looks like, and then it turned sharp and accusing, and then it turned to begging so fast it gave me whiplash. He knew I'd spoken to her, she'd called him out, he said it was all RP bleed, that the money was a loan he was going to pay back after a bonus at work. I told him not to message me again. He showed up at my parents' house at 1 in the morning anyway. My dad, who is a very calm man until he's not, opened the door with that quiet dad look that says you're on very thin ice. Sam stood on the doorstep, shaking, and I could smell he hadn't showered in days. He asked to talk to me. I told him he could talk on the porch. He cried, he said he'd lost control. He said he'd been let go from work last week, that he hadn't told anyone because he thought he could grind out a few commissions from a maid and fix everything before I noticed. He said the wedding was just a joke. He said he didn't sleep, and he didn't know who he was without that stupid game, and it made him feel like someone important for once. He said he was sorry. He said he loved me, he said he'd delete everything, he'd call a therapist, he'd never touch a keyboard again if that's what it took. I listened, because 5 years doesn't just dissolve. Then I told him I believed he felt sorry and also that sorry doesn't undo the lie he told to a stranger about me being gone, Or the 400 pounds he asked her for while I was cooking dinner in the next room, or that wedding, or the hundreds of small, mean little choices he made to get to this porch at 1 a.m., crying under my parents' porch light. I told him the relationship was over, and that me not hating him didn't mean I was coming back. My dad stepped forward and asked him to leave. He did. In the morning, the bride messaged me again to say she'd cancelled everything and gotten her bank to reverse the transfer. She sent me a screenshot of the guild chat where their leader kicked him for scamming and oath deceit, using those exact words, and it felt like watching a door click shut. She thanked me for telling her. I told her to block him and take care of herself. I went back to the flat with my mum later to grab the last few bits I left behind. There was a parcel on the mat addressed to him, a cheap webcam. There was an open notebook on the coffee table with a list written in his messy handwriting. New name, server transfer, fresh start. He'd underlined it twice. I took my stuff, locked his door, and left the keys on the hall table. When I got back to my parents, I booked a therapy appointment for next week. I blocked his number. I made a cup of tea that finally went cold without me noticing. Update 3. I thought it would go quiet after I blocked him. For a week it did. I went to work, I slept like a person who hadn't slept properly in months, I ate toast over the sink and didn't cry at the jam jar. Then on Wednesday night my Instagram pinged with a message request from a man in Sweden asking me, in very polite English, if I was really the girl from Silvermoon. I stared at it for a long time thinking it was a joke until he sent a screenshot. My face, my actual face, from a photo taken in our first flat with those beige curtains, blurred slightly and cropped from the shoulder down like I was trying to be coy. Underneath, messages that made my skin crawl, someone calling themselves K with a heart emoji asking him for 50 quid to get out of a rough situation with an ex and promising to send voice later, because roommate is asleep. He'd sent her the money through PayPal friends and family. He'd sent more a week later. He'd told me he loved me. He'd done a reverse image search after she wouldn't call and that's how he'd found my real profile. He apologized for bothering me and asked if I knew a Sam. I opened my laptop and there were 3 more DMs waiting from strangers with the same sickly pattern. My photos, old ones I hadn't even remembered posting, being used to chat up men on Discord and Steam, asking for small help until payday, promising meetups that never happened. One had a screen recording where I sent a photo of my hand holding up 2 fingers with the caption "Proof it's me," which was something I'd done in 2019 on a night out taking the piss out of influencer poses. He'd scraped my life like it was a prop cupboard and put on a costume. I messaged the bride and told her. She replied immediately like she'd been waiting at the edge of her phone. Then she added me to a group chat already full of little circles popping. 12 women, 2 men, the guild leader, and a bloke called Dan who said he'd lent Sam 100 pounds so they could move somewhere quiet to stream. Everyone started dropping receipts. It was like watching a magic trick in reverse. The vows he'd typed for me were the same ones he'd typed for a night elf on another server in March, line breaks and all. The account as frozen line had been used 6 times. He'd asked for 50 here, 100 there, Steam credit, a graphics card because my one fried, all in that same slightly formal, eager to please tone that at first made me think he was just harmlessly awkward online. I reported the fake accounts with my photos and every donation link I could find. The bride did too. The guild leader sent a mass report to Blizzard with a zip file of logs and screenshots with his character names and timestamps. I didn't expect anything to come of it, but the next day someone forwarded me a screenshot. His main had been permanently banned for scamming and real money trading violations. He made a new account within hours and whispered several of them from a trial character with "You've ruined my life, then you don't know what you're doing, then I'll make more." I didn't see any of that firsthand because I was out at the post office when a detective constable rang me and asked if I could come in for a quick statement about a fraud complaint that listed my old address and my Instagram. I went with my dad because I am now someone who brings her dad to appointments again. The DC was kind, clipped, and clearly very used to sitting across from people shaking with a strange mix of fury and embarrassment. I gave her everything, the screenshots, the Discord IDs, dates, the parcel with the cheap webcam that had come to the flat. She gave me a reference number and told me they were building a file because a few of the transfers involved larger sums and crossed borders. I walked out into the weak afternoon sun feeling like I'd been pressed flat with a book. On Friday I met the bride. We'd said we wouldn't swap names in case it got messy, but there she was at the back table of a cafe near the train station with a coffee gone cold and a tissue clutched in one hand like it was a talisman. She looked like every woman I know when she's trying not to make a scene in public. We hugged in that awkward way where neither of us wanted to admit we needed it. We traded more in person, the way he dodged calls by saying his mic was broken, the way he'd resurface after long silences with a flourish, flowers in-game, a playlist, a copied poem he pretended he'd written. We laughed exactly once, hard and sudden, when I showed her the notebook photo of new name, server transfer, fresh start, and she pulled out her phone and showed me a message where he'd told her he was so glad to have a fresh start with someone honest for once. We sat there until the staff started stacking chairs onto tables and we both realized we hadn't looked at the time. I thought that would be the end, some dark little knot tied off. Then someone from my old building texted me a photo of our front door with police tape on it. My name was still on the postbox, so the neighbor had my number from a parcel mix-up ages ago. I rang the landlord and he met me there. The door wasn't smashed, the tape was from a welfare check after someone called in about shouting and then silence. Inside, the flat smelled like stale energy drinks and unwashed clothes. The PC was gone. The notebook was still on the coffee table, a different page open where he'd scribbled no screens, no games, no lies like he was trying to hypnotize himself. On the kitchen counter, under a pile of takeout menus, was a printed email from GoFundMe with campaign under review at the top and a pixelated header photo of our old holiday snapped at such a mean little angle you could barely tell I'd been in it. The title was Help Sam Rebuild After Abuse. I felt my stomach drop in that way where your body knows something before your brain can decode the words. I took a picture. I sent it to the DC. I sent it to GoFundMe with my passport and a polite paragraph saying the woman in the photo was me and I was not his abuser, I was his ex, and I would appreciate it if they took it down. They did within an hour. I stood in my old kitchen with my mom and the landlord and a yellow sponge that belonged to neither of us, and I suddenly wanted to scrub the entire place until it forgot our names. I didn't hear from him all weekend. Monday morning, I got an email from a rehab clinic with a form attached for an emergency contact confirmation. My email address was on the line next to it. There was a link to a portal and a box I could tick if I consented to be called. I sat with my finger over the trackpad for a long time. In the end, I wrote a short sentence in the notes field saying I was no longer his partner and to remove my details. 2 hours later, the clinic rang anyway. The receptionist apologized and said he'd arrived the night before after a significant episode, that he'd insisted I'd want to know. I told her I did know and that I wished him well, and then I hung up and sat in the car outside the supermarket inhaling the smell of sun-warmed plastic and thinking about how much of my 20s had been spent translating the gap between what he wanted and what actually existed. There's one more strange internet footnote. A Twitch channel popped up on Thursday. Someone sent it to the group chat, called Fresh Startrip. It had a VOD of an empty chair and a black screen with text, "Story time tonight, betrayal and healing." It had 10 followers and a donation link. It was live for 20 minutes and then the channel vanished midstream. The only audio on the VOD was him breathing and a kettle boiling somewhere off screen. Watching it felt like peeking through a neighbor's window by mistake. We closed the tab. The group chat went quiet. One of the men posted a photo of his dog in a ridiculous jumper and we all reacted with little hearts because what else do you do when the story in your phone starts to look like a cracked mirror? I don't have a triumphant moral. I have a calendar reminder for therapy and a new cheap kettle in my parents' kitchen that clicks off with a sound I'm starting to trust again. I have a text thread with a woman I met because a video game put a garland of pixelated flowers on her head and called it a wedding, and now we send each other photos of the stupidest things we see on our commutes. I have a police reference number in a note on my phone and a stack of printed screenshots in a folder I hope I never have to open again. I have a small life that feels like it might actually be my own. And I have exactly one thing of his in a drawer, a Keurig bottle opener with his football team on it, that I forgot to give back and can't bring myself to throw away yet. Not because I want him back. Because I want the part of me that didn't see any of this coming to understand that I'm allowed to keep one useless thing and call it done. Update 4. I was at my parents' kitchen table sticking labels on moving boxes my mom had got from the greengrocer when a white envelope slid through the letterbox with that red stripe that makes your stomach do the wrong sort of flip. It had my name on it, my old address, and a final reminder for a mobile contract I've never had. I rang the number ready to say they'd mix me up with someone else. The woman on the line read back an email that wasn't mine, same first name, heart emoji, a number swapped out, and then said, very helpfully, that my emergency contact was a Samuel H. I made a sound you only ever hear in hospitals and car parks. I asked her to note the account as fraudulent. She did. I hung up, walked into the garden, and counted 7 slugs on the damp path because the world had to have something stupid in it or I was going to start screaming. I rang the DC. She told me to bring the letter in. She said this was good in a way because it meant they could add it to the file. I hung up and felt like I'd just agreed to carry a wet log across a river. His mum messaged me the next day. We've never been close, polite at Christmas lunches, a hug on birthdays, and I hadn't expected to hear from her at all. She asked if we could meet somewhere public. We chose the bench by the duck pond where kids throw bread even though there are signs everywhere asking them not to. She looked smaller than I remembered, like someone had taken a good piece out of her and not put it back right. She had a shoebox on her lap with a tea towel over it. She said she'd been in his room, packing, and found things. She said she didn't know if she should have reached out, but that she couldn't look at it in her house anymore. Inside was an external hard drive with a dinosaur sticker on it, 3 USB sticks on a keyring shaped like a tiny sword, and a notebook with a coffee ring right across the middle of the page like an eclipse. She didn't open anything. She just handed me the box the way you'd pass a cat you've rescued from a tree, arms out, not too tight, ready to let go. I told her I'd take it to the police. She nodded and said, quietly, I don't know who he is on the internet. I only know the lad who used to cry if you took his Pokemon cards. Then she cried into a tissue that had already been through the wash and had soft little baubles all over it. I put my hand on her shoulder and felt the ridiculous urge to tell her everything good he'd ever done, as if that would rearrange the world back into a better shape. I left with the box and took it straight to the station. The DC logged it, asked me not to plug anything in, and wrote my name on a clear bag with a black marker that smelled like school. I went home with sticky fingers and a headache and sat on my bed feeling like a child who'd been allowed to hold a very expensive vase. The bride messaged me that night with a screenshot of a post from a recovery forum. He'd written a list of amends and used initials that were barely trying to hide anyone. K. Lied about you to protect my fantasy. D. Borrowed under false pretenses. J. Used you in a story. The comments underneath were all gentle and earnest and made something in me howl because of how easy it is to sound like you're fixing yourself when you're still drowning other people quietly. I put my phone face down and went to wash my hair because it's the only task my brain will complete without narrating itself to death. 2 days later the DC rang again. She said there was going to be a hearing at the magistrate's court, just an early one, nothing dramatic, and that I didn't have to go unless I wanted to. I didn't want to. I went anyway. The magistrate's court is designed to make you feel like you've been very naughty at school. Lots of brown wood, a smudge on the carpet where everyone turns in the same place, a clock that runs a minute slow. He was in the dock looking like he'd been ironed on a too cool setting. He'd shaved badly, the kind of shave that leaves a pale ghost of stubble like a map of places you missed. When they read out the charge the language was so clean it made the shape of what he'd done look almost pretty. Deception. Fraud by false representation. There was a line about using images without consent that made my skin prickle all over again. They said my name and I felt the whole room tilt towards me with that weird courtroom gravity. He didn't look back. He said guilty in a voice I didn't recognize. His solicitor said words like early plea and addiction and genuine remorse. The CPS man said words like pattern and cross-jurisdictional and numerous victims. The magistrates murmured to each other and then there it was, a suspended sentence, an 18-month community order, a requirement to attend a program, a restraining order with my name on it that made my chest feel like someone had opened a window. There was a compensation order that will probably never be paid and a list of things he had to hand over, including devices. When it was done he looked at the table like it might tell him what to do next. As we filed out, a hand with coral nail varnish squeezed mine. It was the bride. I hadn't known she was there. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. We stood outside in that thin English drizzle that isn't weather so much as a mood, and then we went to a chippy and ate standing up by the bins because there were no seats, chips too hot, mouths burning, grease on our fingers. It felt like living. When I got home there was a brown paper parcel on the mat with no return address. Inside was a stack of glossy photo prints like the kind you get from a supermarket kiosk. Me. Over and over, not in a creepy way, just printed out from whatever folder he'd built in whatever imaginary cupboard he'd been living in. My face looking sideways at a dog I'd fostered for a week. Me with a paper crown on. My chin doubled over a birthday cake. Whoever sent it had slipped in a note in spiky handwriting that said, "Found these on a Discord I moderate. Thought you'd want to know." We banned him. I sat with the prints fanned out like cards and felt a strange, clean fury that had nothing to do with him and everything to do with the idea of my face being used as a lure. I put them back in the envelope and slid them into the folder with the police reference number and shut the drawer like I was closing a mouth. The rehab clinic emailed me again. They were sorry for the error, they'd removed my details, they hoped I was okay. Then they attached a PDF with a polite request for family feedback about his progress. I wrote one sentence in reply, "Please remove my information from all systems." And then, before I could hit send, another email pinged in from the DC with a single line, "We imaged the drive, please can you come in?" I went the next morning. The office they put me in was small and had a pot plant that was heroically trying to be cheerful. The DC slid a printed sheet across the table with one screenshot on it. It was an Excel sheet called Scripts. XLSX. There were columns like opener, compliment, obstacle, ask, escalation, emergency. The opener ones made me want to scrub my hands. "Hey, is your mic weird or is it just late there? You seem honest, can I be honest? Sorry if this is too forward but your vibe is rare." The emergency ones were all the same shape, a train, a broken card, a frozen account, a roommate asleep. The templated promise for later. The DC watched me read the words and then asked if I wanted to see anything else. I said no, because I wanted to go home with only one thing etched behind my eyes instead of 10. She said, "Thank you," and gave me a form to sign and then she said, "I know this is awful, but this kind of need is useful." I nodded like we were discussing the state of a drawer. I went outside and sat in my car and laughed once in a way that sounded like a cough. He broke the restraining order within 3 days, not with a message to me, but by friending my brother on a new account and sending a request with a Thanos quote in the bio like he thought he was cinematic. The DC called and said that counted. He was picked up, held overnight, and brought back in front of the same magistrates in the same room that still smelled like carpet cleaner and disappointment. They activated a chunk of the suspended sentence and added a stalking protection order so ironclad the printout looked like sheet music for silence. He didn't look at me then either. For a second, when they said his full name in that clipped court voice, he flinched. I went home and my mom put a shepherd's pie in front of me like a person might if you just had a baby or come back from war. I ate until I realized I was hungry. I found a bedsit. It has a window that looks onto a brick wall with a rosemary plant and a pot on it, and if I open it at night I can hear the neighbors snore like the sea. I bought a second-hand lamp that makes the whole room look like a soft fruit. I made a list on the back of an envelope, Plates, bin bags, a doormat so the whole world doesn't get tracked in on my shoes. I put the keyring bottle opener in the tin where I'm keeping receipts and spare screws and 2 rogue buttons, and I closed the lid. The bride sent me a photo of a bird with ridiculous hair she'd seen on her commute. I sent her one of the rosemary plant looking like it was plotting something. I slept, and when I woke up at 3 in the morning to pee, I stood in the kitchen and listened to the new kettle click off in a quiet that belonged to me. I don't know if anything is finished. I know the edge is further away than it was. I know I can stand in my own small light and be allowed to be boring again. And somewhere in a drawer in a police station there is a printed spreadsheet with an emergency column that will never be used on me. That is something like a cure. Update 5. The first bill to arrive at the bedsit wasn't even mine. It was an email at 6:11 a.m. from a storage place I'd never heard of, subject line, final notice before auction. The email started high K, and then rambled on about a unit in arrears with a locker number I could taste on my tongue like a battery. The emergency contact was a Samuel H. I stared at the heart until my eyes made it into a little red square and then I rang the number with that steady, brittle politeness you get from calling utilities. The man on the phone sounded laminated. He told me there was a unit under my name, paid in cash for a bit and then late, that auctions were done monthly. I said the word fraud and felt it land like a book on a table. He told me to bring ID. I rang the DC, she told me to wait, and 2 hours later I was in a fluorescent hallway that smelled like cardboard and old socks with a manager jangling keys and the DC at my shoulder with her mouth in that line that means the day has already been long. When the door rolled up it made the sad sort of howl metal makes when it's tired of being a door. Inside was exactly what you'd expect and also worse for how ordinary it looked. A camping chair with a stain in the shape of Australia, a ring light like an unblinking eye. Coil of extension leads, a cheap lapel mic blue tacked to a paper cup. Jiffy bags. A box of burner phones with tiny screens still sticky from where the plastic hadn't been peeled off straight. A cardboard lid with script scrawled across it and underneath, manila folders with names I didn't want to recognize and did. I didn't touch anything. The DC did that tidy careful thing with her gloved hands and said okay to herself in a way that put a square around the scene. There was an envelope on top of a shoebox with K on it in his handwriting that's always looked like he's trying to keep the letters from running away. The DC looked at me, I nodded, and she slid a corner with her fingernail so the flap came up like a weak hinge. Inside was an apology typed on clean white paper with the blanks still in brackets where he'd forgotten to fill them. I am truly sorry for harm. I know I caused you feeling. I will make amends by specific action. There was a second page with a neat grid of if they are angry, say and if they are quiet, say and if they cry, hold silence for 3 beats. There was a photo of me from 2018 with the top chopped off so my hairline became a thought he'd erased. I didn't cry. I wanted to go home and do the washing up. He wasn't in the unit, which would have been a different sort of story. The manager told us, in one of those voices you use when you're trying not to take sides with a stranger, that a skinny lad carried the ring light in the week after Christmas and came back at odd hours, that once he'd heard a kettle boiling through the door like someone was recording a cough. The DC said, thank you and wrote it all down while the felt tip squeaked. The CPS moved quickly in the way that makes you think nothing in the system is fast and then sometimes it is and you have to match your feet to it. They added counts and sent it up. I got an email I read sitting cross-legged on my floor with toast crumbs on my leggings asking if I wanted to give a victim personal statement and whether I wanted to read it aloud. I wrote it at the table with the rosemary plant looking up at me like it had opinions. It wasn't a speech. It was the shape of a life turned lumpy. I wrote about getting a phone call addressed to a heart and having to move that heart out of my name. I wrote about how my mother keeps making kettles of tea like a ritual and I keep forgetting to drink them. I wrote that being an idea in someone else's head for months has made mirrors feel like interviews. I wrote that he had a spreadsheet. The crown court is all echo and marble and a polite cough. There was a clatter from somewhere that made everyone turn at the same time like birds. He was there, smaller than the room, clean jumper, that raw shave again, his solicitor murmuring in his ear like a man about to read a bedtime story with taxes in it. They asked if I wanted to read my statement. I did. My hands shook words loose. The judge watched me with a kind of patient interest I found almost kind. I said all the lines I'd written at my little table. When I said the word script the corners of his mouth moved in a way I couldn't read and I suppose that's the point. My years of trying to read him were a kind of unpaid work. The judge talked about sustained pattern and targeting and misappropriation of likeness, which made my face feel like an object on a shelf. They talked about breach of order like a thing you could drop and crack. The numbers at the end were mercifully short sentences without commas. He got time. Not forever, not a movie, but time you can count on your fingers when you're washing up. Half inside. Program work when he's out. No devices without someone peering over his shoulder with a clipboard that says they've been told to. He did look at me, once, as they stood him up. It wasn't a look for me. It was the look of someone finding the exact middle of a window frame so they can swear later that they saw sky. I didn't feel anything as noble as closure. I felt like I'd put down a heavy bag far enough away from a river that if it rolled it wouldn't reach the water. Outside, the bride was sitting on the low wall by the bike racks in a coat with a missing button and a coffee that had gone the color of cardboard. She lifted one hand. I sat. We didn't talk about him. We watched a man try to park too close to a pillar and then orphan his wing mirror. She showed me 3 photos of a pigeon with the most extravagant chest feathers I've ever seen and I laughed like a hiccup. We found a corner shop and bought rocket lollies and stood in the bit between the automatic doors that keeps the cold out and ate them there as if we'd invented a new ritual. 2 nights later, the neighbor in my building knocked with that soft edge people get when they're about to tell you an unfunny thing. A bailiff had been to his door by mistake asking for me with an old address and a debt for a gaming chair in installments. The paper had the wrong flat. I rang the company and listened to a man in a headset try to be both apologetic and procedural. He read out my email back to me with a heart in it and I said, very evenly, that I did not put hearts in legal documents, and then, because I couldn't help myself, ever. He marked it. I sent the DC the scan. She wrote back with "we're there now" and a photo through a chain-link fence of the same unit with the number spray painted on it and a rectangle of light on the floor like the room was making sense of itself without us. His mum rang to say she'd gone to see him before they took him. He'd asked after me and she'd said, and I could hear the pride and the terror do in her voice, "That's not yours to ask anymore." I told her I was glad she said it. She asked if I'd take a plant cutting because her kitchen is dark and she wants it to live somewhere light. It was rosemary, of course it was, wrapped in wet kitchen roll and foil like a packed lunch. I put it in a glass on my windowsill and it looked like a tiny ship's mast. There was one more little clap of madness. A man with a soft Midlands accent rang my work mobile and introduced himself as the moderator of a Discord I didn't belong to. He said they'd done a sweep after the arrest and found a channel marked archive. He said my name softly and then he didn't say it again. He asked if I wanted him to message me anything. I said I didn't, please, not screenshots, not anything I'd need to put in a drawer. He said he'd deleted it all and banned 3 new accounts with the same strange ticks of punctuation. He said you're all right, in the old way men say it when they hand you a heavy bag off a train. I put the phone down and stood very still until the shape of me came back. There is a piece of paper on my kitchen pinboard now, my own scrap, my own stupid little law, that says I do not have to read anything that makes me feel rehearsed. The bedsit smells like the rosemary mostly, and once a week like bleach, and sometimes like toast when I remember to take it out on time. I used the bottle opener from the tin on a Friday night to open a ginger beer and then I washed it and put it back. The world did not tilt. The kettle clicks off and no one is crying on a porch. I planted the cutting this morning and pressed the soil down with the flat of my hand like sealing an envelope addressed to myself. When I look at it, it looks back without needing me to be anyone else.